Hey everyone, and welcome. When you hear the term big business, what pops into your head? Probably some massive corporation, right? And for small business, maybe it's the coffee shop on your corner. But what if I told you it's actually not that simple? Today, we're going to break down what really defines the size of a business. So let's just dive right in with the big question. What truly makes a business big? I mean, is it how many people they employ, or is it all about the money they make? Well, the answer, it might just surprise you.
Okay, check this out. Let's imagine two companies. Company A has just 20 employees, but it pulls in a staggering $500 million in revenue. Then you've got Company B with a huge workforce, 2,000 people, but they only bring in a tenth of that revenue. So, who's the real giant here? See, it's not as simple as it looks, and that's exactly the knot we're here to untangle today.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll build our measurement toolkit so we can size up any company properly. Then we'll jump into the ring for the big versus small showdown and see where each one really shines. After that, we'll map out the journey to growth. And finally, we'll explore the pretty surprising strategy behind why some businesses stay small. Sound good? Let's get into it.
First up, the measurement toolkit. Because, before you can declare a winner in any fight, you gotta know how you're keeping score. This is the official tale of the tape for figuring out business size.
So, the most obvious one, right? Headcount, just the number of employees. It's super intuitive and honestly a great way to measure size for industries that are all about people, like a busy restaurant or a design agency.
But, and this is a big but, what about a super automated factory or a tiny tech startup with an algorithm that changes the world? These places can have a massive, massive impact with just a skeleton crew. It just goes to show you that counting heads doesn't always tell the whole story.
Okay, so let's grab another tool, revenue. This is just the total amount of money a company brings in from sales. It's a really powerful way to see how much of a footprint a company has, especially when you're comparing two rivals fighting for the exact same customers. But, and this is so important, high revenue can be totally misleading. A business can be pulling in tons of cash from sales, but if its costs are just out of control, it's basically a sinking ship. Selling a lot is not the same thing as being profitable.
Next up, we've got something called capital employed. The easiest way to think about this is just the total value of all the heavy-duty gear a business owns. We're talking buildings, giant machines, expensive equipment. For industries like airlines with their fleets of jets or car companies with their huge factories, this number tells you the sheer scale of their operation.
And finally, my personal favorite, market share. This one isn't about how big you are in a vacuum. It's about how much of the entire pie you control. A company with a dominant market share, well, they're the leader of the pack, no matter what their other numbers look like.
All right, our toolkit is ready, so it is time for the main event, the big versus small showdown. Let's see what happens when we put the giants in one corner and the underdogs in the other.
The absolute superpower of big business is something called economies of scale. They buy in bulk, they mass produce, they hire experts for everything, and all of that drives their costs way, way down. But small businesses, they have their own secret weapon, agility. They're like speedboats that can turn on a dime to chase a new opportunity, while the big guys are like these massive cargo ships that need miles and miles just to change course.
Big companies also have immense market power. They can afford to lower their prices to crush competitors, and they can pour millions into new technology. So, what's the small business countermove? They become masters of the niche. They find these small, passionate groups of customers that the big players totally ignore, and they serve them so perfectly that they build an incredibly loyal following.
And of course, when it comes to money, big companies have a huge leg up. It's just easier for them to attract investors and get massive loans from banks. But small businesses, they trade in a different kind of capital, personal relationships. That direct connection they build with customers creates a kind of loyalty that money just can't buy. So, to sum up the showdown, big business wins on pure efficiency and power, but its biggest risk is being too slow to change. Small business, on the other hand, wins with its agility and sharp focus, but it can be really vulnerable if it runs out of resources. The key thing to remember is that there's no single winner here. It's all a game of strategic trade-offs.
But what if a small business wants to get big? Well, that leads us right into our next section, the journey to growth. This is where we look at how the small contenders can bulk up and change their weight class.
So when you boil it all down, there are basically two roads you can take to get bigger. The first is internal, or what we call organic growth. This is growing from the inside out, Launching new products, opening new locations. It's the slow and steady, more controlled approach. The other option is external growth, buying or merging with another company. This is the fast track for sure, but it is loaded with risk.
And this external growth? Well, it comes in three main flavors. A horizontal merger is when you team up with a direct competitor, basically to own more of the market. Then there's vertical integration, where you buy a supplier or a distributor to get more control over your whole process. And then you have the wild card, a conglomerate merger, which is buying a business in a completely different industry.
Now, the appeal of growing this way is pure speed. I mean, you can literally double your market share overnight. But the dangers are real. The cultures of the two companies might be a toxic mix, the price tag can be astronomical, and for a lot of entrepreneurs, it means losing control of the very thing they built from the ground up.
All this talk about getting bigger really leads to an important question. Is growth always the goal? In our final section, we're going to explore why staying small can actually be a brilliant strategic choice and not some kind of failure.
There are a ton of really powerful reasons to stay small. Sometimes it's as simple as the owner's choice. They just love their business exactly as it is. For others, it's a deliberate strategy to completely own that niche we talked about, or to keep that flexibility and customer closeness that just gets lost when you get too big. And let's be honest, sometimes the market itself, like for a neighborhood barbershop, can only support a small firm.
Which brings us to the single most important takeaway from this whole explainer. There is no one best size for a business. It just doesn't exist. Success isn't about being big or small. It's about being the right size to achieve your specific goals, whatever they might be. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. If you were starting a business right now, today, would you chase the power that comes with massive scale, or would you aim for the precision of masterful specialization? The right answer? Well, it all depends on the story you want to write. Thanks so much for tuning in.